I would like to call this Planning Commission meeting to order. Today is Wednesday, December the 14th. May I have a roll call, please?
Chairman Amanda Denmark.
Here.
Charlie Wetmore.
Here.
Lydia DuPaul.
Here.
Jim Flynn.
Here.
Kathleen Duncan.
Here. The Planning Commission will not hear new items after 9:30 unless authorized by a majority vote of the commission members present. Items which have not been heard before 9:30 may be continued to the next regular meeting or special meeting date as determined by the commission members. Notice regarding public comments. Every member of the public who is recognized to speak shall address the chairman and in speaking avoid disrespect to the commission staff or other members of the meeting. State your name and address when speaking. For the record, comments are limited to 3 minutes. May I have an adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
May I have an adoption of the minutes from November the 16th?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Do we have any public comments for items not on the agenda?
No,
Do we have any for the agenda?
not at this time.
Not at this time. Okay. And we don't have any old business, so we do have new business. Item number 1, Ma Daisy's street naming. I do need to recuse myself, so Charlie, please take over.
And for the record, I do have Amanda's recusal form.
And item number 1, Ma Daisy's street naming, a request by Daisy's Legacy Holdings LLC for approval of a street naming application. Project consists of redeveloping 1.85 acres to include restaurant, commercial, and residential uses in 4 buildings. The property is identified by a tax map number in the agenda, located at 1255 May River Road within the Neighborhood General Historic District. Okay.
Thank you. Street naming application for Ma Daisy. This is a request by Daisy's Legacy Holdings LLC for approval of the street naming application. The applicant is requesting approval of the following street names to be used for the future development of Ma Daisy's. Road names are Ma Daisy's Way, accepted no conflict, Frazier's Way, not acceptable, multiple conflicts within the county, and Eustace's Way, accepted no conflict. Introduction is on April 27, 2022. Town of Bluffton Planning Commission approved the preliminary development plan for Ma Daisy's. Town staff is currently reviewing the final development plan submittal. The street naming application provides potential names for the single road that needs to be named for the development. The street naming application was reviewed at the December 7, 2022 meeting of the Development Review Committee with 2 of the 3 street names approved. Planning Commission actions are approve the application as submitted by the applicant, approve the application with conditions, or deny the application as submitted by the applicant. This is the review criteria and analysis for street naming. Staff recommendation finding, town staff finds that 2 of the proposed new street names are acceptable and meet the requirements of Article 3 of the Unified Development Ordinance. As stated above, staff recommendation, staff finds that the requirements of Section 315.3 have been met and recommends that the Planning Commission approve the following 2 new street names, Ma Daisy's Way and Eustace's Way.
Any questions? Entertain a motion?
A motion to approve the staff recommended names Ma Daisy's Way and Eustace's Way.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Motion carries. Back to you.
Thank you, Charlie. Okay, item number 2 is the New Riverside Village Parcel 7 for a Certificate of Appropriateness Highway Corridor Overlay District. And Charlotte, you're going to present.
Thank you. So this is a request by the applicant, Court Atkins Group, on behalf of the owner, Jeffrey Solomon, and they are requesting approval of a Certificate of Appropriateness Highway Corridor Overlay to approve the landscape, lighting, and architectural plans for a 15,000 square foot office building within the New Riverside Village development. The property is approximately 1.56 acres. It's known as Parcel 7, and it's located at the southeast corner of Highway 170 and 46. It's zoned New Riverside PUD, and it is within the New Riverside Village Master Plan. And here you see the location map. And the proposed building, as I indicated, it's a 15,000 square foot building. The one-story portion will be a dental office. The two-story portion will be 6 tenants. And there is a separation, as you can see here in the middle, a courtyard, but the building is attached. Site plan that you see here, I just want to point out a few things. The plans that we received indicated that the property line ended where you see this blue line. That's not the property line. The property line is actually closer to 46. There is a 60-foot wide buffer, landscape existing buffer to be untouched. A couple of other things to point out too. The elevation that I showed you, this particular elevation, the front, will face into the gas station adjacent, known as Refuel, and there will be an access easement locating both. The building will have its dumpster on its own property, but it will need an access easement to allow the dumpster, the dump truck to come pick up the garbage. And so it looks like the dumpster location is off-site. It is not, and I believe you spoke about that during the preliminary plan. The area over here, it's not certain why there's this open area adjacent to the west, and that western parcel is open space. So one of our conditions will be that the buffer be extended and more trees and shrubs can be planted in that area. More elevations of the proposed building. Again, this is the property this is the elevation facing into the gas station to the east. This is the elevation that will face into the park to the west. The elevation here will face into New Riverside Village Way. And then this portion that you see here at the bottom will face into Highway 46. Again, there is a 60-foot buffer, so there won't be full visibility of the building. As I noted on the landscape plan, it did not identify the 60-foot buffer, and that will need to be shown on a revised plan. Within that buffer, there needs, per the highway corridor overlay, it will need to show that the landscaping requirements are being met, the 7 overstory trees, 6 understory, and 30 shrubs. Another concern of ours with regard to the landscape plan is that it's a little bit inconsistent with the lighting plan. So the trees are shown in the areas where light posts are proposed, and that will be something that will need to be revised. Pointing out too, I indicated another thing that we noticed, and it's more site-oriented, and I don't have, let's see. We are recommending that there be a sidewalk from New Riverside Village right-of-way into the front of the building. There is a sidewalk located here in the rear, but we believe that a sidewalk would be appropriate and allow these cars that are parked here to probably more easily access the building than having to go farther into the property. The lighting plan, as I indicated, there's some inconsistencies between where the trees are planted in the landscape islands and the light posts. So these are the yellow areas are the areas that are inconsistent. Along the building, there will be the gooseneck lighting. One of our concerns with regard to the actual posts that are proposed in the parking area is that they are too tall per the requirements, and that we are suggesting that they be more pedestrian-oriented, somewhere between 10 to 12 feet, and that this style of lighting not be used. The light posts that are in New Riverside Village right now are more traditionally oriented, but we're not saying they have to be consistent with that. It's just something similar and smaller in height. One thing that I should also mention too is that the illumination levels exceed the requirement of the BDZSO, and so that will need to be corrected as well. the average illumination, foot candles, and then at some areas is inconsistent, and we have some hot spots in some areas. So 10-foot candles maximum, for example, in the parking area, and I believe they're showing something like 22 in some areas of the parking lot. So that will need to be corrected. And I feel like I may have gone through this rather quickly. Here's the criteria for you to review, and I'll talk a little bit more about A as we go through the conditions. The application does have to comply with the development agreement, the concept plan, the master plan of New Riverside Village, as well as the covenants, conditions, and restrictions. So we will need a letter from the declarant approving this COFA. And then the application has to comply with the application's manual, which it does. So your actions tonight are either to approve as submitted, approve with conditions, or deny the application. As indicated, there are conditions related to this application that I'd like to go over. Some of them I already have. This is more of a talking about the landscaping portion of the plan, things I haven't covered. Wheel stops do need to be provided so that we don't have any vehicular overhang into landscape areas. Mentioned the connection in the northwest portion of the property. That area needs to be landscaped, the buffer area extended. What I didn't mention, I overlooked earlier when I was going through the landscape portion, is that we did not receive a grading plan, and the grading or the average mean sea level that was identified on the plan is showing 23. It's actually somewhere in the range of 39 to, I believe, 41, so that will need to be corrected. It's very possible that the 8 trees in that property may not be able to be retained. And so we'll want to know whether or not we need to plant more trees once that's corrected. Indicated that the buffer does require to be certain that it complies with the BDZSO. And as you know, there were changes to the stormwater ordinance which changed tree requirements for PUDs. And so it appears that additional trees will need to be planted. They have provided 19 trees, hardwood trees, of the 23 that are required. So 4 additional trees will have to be planted, or they will, or they have the choice of paying for the fee in lieu, pursuing that. There does appear to be room to be able to provide 4 trees. With regards to the lighting, and this is something that's come up before, Planning Commission will need to make a determination whether or not LED lighting is appropriate. And again, the illumination level will need to be corrected to match the requirements of the BDZSO. And we are recommending that the light post heights be reduced somewhere between 10 to 12 feet, and that the luminaire be more appropriate as well, rather than the cobra head. Architecturally, they have provided the dumpster enclosure, which would be wood. One thing they did indicate on the dumpster enclosure is that there would be a door on the north side, which is facing into Highway 46. We are recommending that that door be on the south side of the enclosure instead, so that the enclosure can be screened. And with regards to screening, we are recommending that the entire height of the enclosure be screened, so some additional landscaping would be necessary. There were some mislabeling on certain pages. I've identified that there, elevations, the average mean sea level, and the property line will need to be relabeled. The dumpster dimensions between the lighting plan and the landscape plan were inconsistent, and that will need to be updated. With regard to the handrail, we just want to point out that it will be required and that it has to comply with building code, and we are suggesting that it be something that's architecturally appropriate for the building. And on the landscape plan, the light post location should be shown to identify if there are any conflicts. The sidewalk I mentioned previously, we will need the letter from the declarant, and if there is to be signage, that will go through a separate sign permit process. And with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions for Charlotte before I ask the applicant to speak?
I do have a general question as it relates to, can you go back to where you showed that part of the property that is actually part of the property now in the buffer? Yeah, right there.
Okay.
On the other drawings, we're showing a pathway going through there. Whose responsibility is that pathway?
That's the responsibility of the developer, so the master developer for the entire site. So it's not their responsibility.
The only reason I asked is because the property line moved from where, okay. So, and we're holding them to that.
Yes.
Okay. Do we need to require a connection from this property to that pathway? Wouldn't be a bad idea.
Mr. Whitmore, my recollection is that when that path was set into place, the last show it it is a permanent easement as part of the documents for the development of the Riverside Village. As part of the discussions between the town and the master developer for New Riverside Village. So we can get you a precise answer to that, but I don't think it's this reaction is I don't think it needs to be a condition.
No, I'm talking connectivity.
I understand where you're coming from, but what you don't see is right off the screen is that on the west side of this is the town-owned property. That's the park and pond, and there is a connection there to this trail. So this is more of a naturalized trail, and it's not necessarily an ADA compliant trail in the sense of it's not paved, but it is, again, it's meant to be a more of a walking trail, and there is a connection at that point. We're not requiring any other connecting points beyond where there's a road connection and then pedestrian connection.
It's more like what's around Buckwalter Place then?
Yes.
Okay. I'm kind of late in the process for this, but I would question that if we were earlier in the process. You know, you're gonna have a lot of people biking and walking along there that can't really bike and walk along there if it's a mulch trail, but. Well, that should have been with the master developer, and I thought we had that discussion, but.
It's not this project, so we can't.
Yeah.
And if I may, for the record, I forgot to do this before I spoke. Richardson LaBruce, Mayor Melvin Brooks and LaBruce, I'm here on your behalf, not here on behalf of the town of Bluffton, but here for the planning commission, any questions you may have. So that was a matter of negotiation between the town and the master developer that went through the negotiation. I believe that went through negotiating committee. And one of the items that was discussed was what that trail was going to consist of. And I think it was never intended to be a multi-purpose path. It was a very limited and very natural trail, and just to have some pedestrian connectivity to the extent that they were
And
about it.
to our chair's point, this is a conversation for not now, so I can.
Well, but it's, as y'all know, we look into those sorts of issues at Planning Commission, and y'all have questions about connectivity and the infrastructure that's in place. So I certainly appreciate the question.
Would the applicant like to speak?
Good evening, James Atkins with Court Atkins Group, and I also have Dan Kiefer with Whitmer Jones Kiefer. Appreciate the thorough review. We've already crossed off several of these things off the list in anticipation of the meeting. And, just quick summary on the stuff that Charlotte outlined. Wheel stops we'll be adding. I believe there's when you look at the site, there's kind of a bank to the left of this that the town property owns, and it's all grass nicely. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan was thinking that kind of grass bank would continue up into the site, but have no problem filling in and removing it and putting the buffer along the whole thing. We just thought it might create some visual connectivity to the park next to it. It wasn't meant to drive on it or anything like that, but no problem adding plants.
Do you want to make it a little bit easier, maybe? Do you have the recommendations You said you crossed off some already that
Oh.
you know you can do.
Yeah.
I didn't know, maybe if you could go down that list, then we'll know what you're,
Yep, perfect. And I think these written out by Jason
Sorry.
here are in that order. So number 2, or B, sorry, 1B, no problem there. We'll add landscaping, remove the grass connection. The grading plan, we went out to the site this morning and took another look. There, where the existing drive and sidewalk and part of the development, it was cut in pretty low. And so I think there are a few trees up in the corner. They're nothing sacred. They're not significant trees. I think we probably will end up losing those and planting new live oaks along the property there. So we'll make that clarification. I think by the time we build wells and things around them, they'll die. It'd be better to plant new stuff. Adding 4 trees, we've got plenty of room. We can put a couple of them in the grass area that we removed. Talking to Dan, they're certainly well qualified to make sure that we adjust the buffer and get the plantings in there. No issues there at all. Down arrow. So we did look into the lighting. I think in the past LED has been approved. I just think specific to this thing, it was not on the approved light fixture type. Obviously, they're good and they've come a long ways. They're not like glowing.
that's just a determination we have to.
Yeah. So we would hopefully get LED lighting approved. We did some research. We're going back. There's a couple different BZDSO documents, and we'll work with town to make sure we get the right illumination levels because they were slightly different, but had no problem getting those down there. And then we've also reached out to the master developer regarding the site lighting to coordinate and get that to fit in more with the overall development. We don't really have any intention of making a statement piece out of the site lighting here, so we'll match the existing development and lower those. And then their locations, we had already noted that in working with Dan when we got that we're going to move them from the tree islands to the back of the parking strips and then chime onto the parking lot. So we've already noted those, and they're rerunning the photometrics with all that. So no problem there.
Will you, when you put that plan through and final, make sure that those are on the same plan so that's not trying to compare 2 different plans?
We will.
So, yeah, okay.
Final, yep, absolutely. Let's see where we're at. Yep, lower the lights, no problem. So we're on a good roll here. Make sure that the dumpster enclosure is reviewed and compliant with standards. It's not a huge dumpster enclosure, so we're going to recommend removing the pedestrian door and open up the gates and throw the trash in there. Again, they're trash cans that they're bags of trash that they're going to realize. I don't think that, I hate to get off cue here and mess this up, but let me. I think we had shown a door up here for some reason, but I'm not sure why we wouldn't just, like most dumpster places, open up the doors and throw the trash in. It's not a trash intensive operations. All of this stuff, by the way, the town noted easements. There's a big cross easement that runs through all this stuff. So we actually, fortunately, the civil engineer is doing both projects, and so he's reached out to Refuel. They've come to an agreement to allow access here, and we checked the turning radiuses for all their gas tanker trucks and everything fit out from there. So I think the key changes were relocating the dumpster from here to here, and to widen this planting strip to the minimum. So we got both of those taken care of in a relatively quick time frame for turnaround, but we missed a couple labeling things and stuff, so we'll get those cleaned up. Rooftops. Gosh, I should have stayed where I was. The rooftop equipment, we believe, is screened. We can put it on the roof plan to ensure, but if you look here, what we've done, it's ranges from 2 to 3 feet on the main pivot, but the HVAC units actually tuck up right behind the front of the building and the larger roof sections, which serve 2 purposes: get some sloped roof porch-like elements, and screen the package units that are right behind that. I don't know if there's a roof
I think
plan.
I've asked before, another applicant, if you could maybe on the roof plan just show the location. I don't know if that was,
Yes, we,
just as an extra
I know
note.
we're not supposed to bring drawings, but for some reason they got turned off. But if you want to see where they're at, I can show you. Need like one of those old school projectors. So those are the units right there sitting
Yeah,
behind those
okay.
roof sections.
Thanks.
Yep. All right, I haven't broken the machine yet. So let's start. Rooftop units, relocate the man door, so we're recommending we remove the man door and we can get more screening around the dumpster, which was another, add additional plantings, so.
Talk a little more in the mic, because
Oh, sorry, we will, we're gonna remove the man door and it'll give us a chance to get more landscaping around the dumpster, which was also noted, so we'll get Mr. Kiefer to update that. Labeling, yes, appreciate you all doing some QA/QC for us, so we'll get that taken care of. We'll get the, I'm not sure, like, it actually shows label 3 property lines on the drawing, so clearly the top was the property line, and then the buffers and the building setbacks are kind of lined up there, so we'll get that cleaned up. Correction of dimensions, we talked about pedestrian access enclosure. Not really sure, I mean, we talked internally about if we wanted to stripe a path in the roadway or something, or I'm not really sure what we're looking for there with moving the dumpster off of where it was over to where it's at. Works better for the trucks and everything, it's a little farther for the,
yeah.
The
for
intent,
clarification.
yeah, the intent was that is when you had that man door on the side that was facing towards May River Road, you would have to actually go up onto the curb, and then there was no actual pathway to that door.
yeah,
So that was the intent of this comment right here.
okay, so with removal of the door, it probably
That'll negate it.
mixes that makes sense.
Yep.
We will keep Richard happy, we'll get some handrails, they'll be relatively simple, black handrails, nothing fancy. Talked about light locations, we're moving those, it's already in the works. Sidewalk, we will add that, it used to connect all the way down, and I felt like it was way too much concrete, but then we removed it all, so we'll get a typical sidewalk width connected up to the main driveway. I think it makes sense anyway, we've got parking out on the streets as well.
And if I could, the intent for that comment is the fact that sidewalk is closest to the park. Without having that grading plan, we weren't sure the grade of the sidewalk from the existing sidewalk to the doors. So our concern was making sure that you were going to meet the proper slope because of that grade separation.
Yeah, and in the overall development, because some of that is at 40, and if you go out there, when they cut that all in, we're actually, I think the 2-story building, so which is kind of at grade, the other one's raised up, is kind of at 37. So I mean, we're actually kind of cutting down into that and getting that a little bit closer. Let's see here. We received the declarant, the letter 2 days ago or yesterday, so we have that now, and we will submit signage and ask questions. So we're good with all of the comments, and we'll have to take any further questions. Dan, anything to add? No?
Appreciate all of that. Does anyone have anything further to ask, or did that cover?
I was just curious, I heard you say that the HVAC is on the roof. Is there any other service areas going in around the side of this property? The sides of the building?
Everything's on the roof, so there's no service yards on the ground or anything to screen. We've got planters and gardens.
Water meters, electrical boxes?
There'll be an electrical meter on the building.
Where's that intended to go?
One question.
While you're at it, fixed ladder?
Sorry?
Fixed ladder or interior access?
Interior access. I'm not sure where the transformer and the power is coming from, to be honest with you. Now that I said, and I don't know if it's been determined. Something we'll have to look for on the. We certainly won't have it here. It might, if I had my druthers, I think the room is kind of stuck right in the middle here. So we'll probably integrate it on an inside corner back here behind the buffer area. But we can get that coordinated and noted on the final plans for sure.
My only other comment that I wanted to make, and it's more of a request than it is anything else, where that dumpster is located, and Charlotte's kind of covered this already, I do want those purpose a little taller than what they were, but then extending towards the gas station, continuing that buffer, and it doesn't have to be the podocarpus, it could be, I don't remember what the other shrub is that runs along there, it could be repeating those. But just so that the front door, so those doors, that front face of the dumpster isn't visible from the right of way.
You're talking right in this zone. Yeah.
And that may be, honestly, that may be covered once you do the landscaping within the buffer anyway. I just want that screened in some capacity.
Absolutely. Yep, we'll get it screened.
Okay. Well, does anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a
You'll
motion.
make that motion? Go for it.
I move to approve the certificate of appropriateness and highway corridor overlay for the new Riverside Village Parcel 7 with conditions as follows. 1, landscape plan, conditions A through E, as provided by staff report. And number 2, lighting plan, approval of the proposed LED lighting, condition A, and conditions B and C, as provided in the staff report. And number 3, the architectural plan, conditions A through C, as provided in the staff report. And number 4, other items, conditions A through H, as provided in the staff report.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Have any further discussion?
I have one parting thought I'd like to share. There's a lot of resources and time that are dedicated by staff and this planning commission. One of the things that I struggled with this application was the
Amount?
tidiness of the drawings. And because there's so much time dedicated on the part of staff and on this group up here, putting our attention on things that are just, they're not beneficial and they're not useful and they're not, it's taking away from where the time could be placed. And so I'm just asking the applicants this applicant and future applicants to bear that in mind as we move forward with future submittals.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay, thank you. All right, item number 3, Crown at Buck Island Apartments Development Plan application. Dan, you're going to present this one?
Thank you. This is a preliminary development plan for Crown at Buck Island Apartments. It is a request by the property owner, Buck Island Partners LLC, for approval of the preliminary development plan for a multifamily apartment complex. The 10.1 acre property is located at 412 Buck Island Road. That's approximately 900 feet north of May River Road. This is the subject property shown on an aerial. It's the subject property as it's shown in Bluffton Explorer, showing buildings. The application is for a preliminary development plan on 10.1 acre parcel. It's located within the light industrial zoning district and is subject to the standards set forth in the Town of Bluffton Unified Development Ordinance. Project consists of a 200-unit apartment complex containing 4 proposed 4-story multifamily buildings and associated open space, amenities, parking, and stormwater management. Staff comments on the preliminary development plan were reviewed at the June 22nd meeting of the Development Review Committee. On November 14th, the applicant provided a response to comments and updated the site development plans to address the comments provided. This is a zoning map. The subject parcel is outlined in yellow. This shows that north of the property is also zoned light industrial, that's Resort Services, Inc. South of the property, year-round pools is also light industrial. Across the street on Buck Island Road is neighborhood commercial. The rear of the property is residential general, and further north of the property is residential general as well. This is the site plan. I'll just quick instruction. This is the primary entrance north of the property. This will be a full entrance. You can go left or right in and out of the property. This is a right-in, right-out entrance only. The leasing office is located in here, and the amenities are here. There's also, on the first floor is parking in this building only. Stormwater is located down here. The site data, I don't know if you can see this or not. We have a total open space that's required is 20%. They're providing 44%. That's the left diagram. The right diagram is common open space or functional open space. 10% is required. They're providing 13%. Proposed site coverage, maximum you can have is 75%. Site coverage is 51% as proposed. The required parking, a total of 405 spaces are required. That's 2 spaces per apartment unit plus 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet for the leasing office. Leasing office is approximately 1,100 square feet. That works out to 5 additional spaces. So a total of 405 spaces required, and they are providing a total of 405 spaces. Review criteria comes out of section 310.3A of the Unified Development Ordinance. They're listed here. Planning Commission actions are approve the application as submitted by the applicant, approve the application with conditions, table the application, or deny the application as submitted by the applicant. And town staff finds that the requirements of section 310.3A of the Unified Development Ordinance have been met. It recommends that the Planning Commission approve the application as submitted. So the suggested motion is that the Planning Commission approves the application as submitted. And I'll answer any questions if you have any.
I have one question. On our packet, it said the recommendation, was this incorrect? Do we need to omit that? The recommendation of provide 9 parking spaces?
Well, we'll take care of that. I rethought that. I removed that as a recommendation. It calculates out to 9 handicap parking spaces. They were providing 8, but we'll catch that at final development plan. It's not a big issue.
Okay.
And is there any requirement for planting between the parking and the access at the north of the property, like distance-wise, or is that fine?
The planting along the
It seems like the
property
parking
line.
spaces are almost touching the.
They are, and I don't know if you caught it or not, they're proposing a brick wall that I think is.
Oh, that's what's in between the two.
That's correct.
Got it. Okay.
And then there's about 3 feet, 3 feet of actual area that's plantable. We had a discussion about living.
Yeah, we worked with the landscape architect and the engineer, just because of the proximity to the drive aisle and where the parking was located. The way the ordinance is written is that you could have the landscaping or you could do a combination. So by putting that brick wall in, we're providing that in essence, the landscaping component to it. So,
Okay.
there was just a tight squeeze for the access through there. And I'm sorry. And part of the reason why is because it still provides the functionality for the adjacent property. So RSI, they do have trucks that go into that area right there, so they needed to make sure that they had sufficient space to be able to maneuver their trucks into their bay doors.
Okay, that makes sense.
So, what? So they use that same drive?
Yes.
So that's an easement?
Yes.
That's an easement. It's on
this
the,
property or their property?
the easement's it's on the Crown property. It's a 20-foot access easement. It also provides access to the lift station that's back there.
Yeah, I see that. So what is the material, I guess, if they're, I know that it's just a rendering. So the gray driveway that comes, I mean, is that gonna continue all the way to the lift station?
No,
Or what is that material change of just,
this entrance is gonna be improved. I don't know what it is right now, whether it's,
It'll be asphalt.
it'll be asphalt.
so then to get access to the lift station, what is it?
Gravel. It's like a gravel dirt. I mean, it's an unimproved access point at that point.
So RSI doesn't,
And it
it
just
just
continues
uses
across here.
before the curve? Before it
Yes.
curves into, okay. Anybody else have any questions for Dan? The applicant want to speak?
Actually, I do.
Okay, never mind. Charlie?
I'm gonna ask, and I suspect this is UDO related, but I'm gonna ask the question I ask on every single one. Where did we get the density from? Did we create this, or did it
It's
come
our
from somewhere else?
form-based code, it's light industrial, so the, it's, well, they can have as many units as can fit in there that they can park and provide stormwater for.
Because
So
it's,
there's no set density, the density is based upon building
because it's
size.
not in a master plan, it's in UDO, and they have by right the zoning to do that.
Yes,
Okay, that's, go ahead.
that's where our recommendation comes from.
Was that?
Then there's no height requirement?
Well,
They
that's
can
my next
have
question.
a two-story to four-story building, all four of these are proposed as four-story buildings.
So we're allowing 4 stories there where we don't have anything over 2 stories currently.
Right. It's allowed by right in the light industrial district.
UDO light industrial. Is there an actual specific height, and have we've verified with the fire department that they can handle a 4-story building there?
Fire department, I can't remember if Dan Wiltsey had any comments that he was okay, whatever comments that he had were remedied prior to this middle here.
I would just ask we make that clear before final.
Yes.
As-
Fire marshal has been involved throughout this process, yeah.
Yeah, well, I know he would have been on the initial VRC, but just
Yes.
that height and that. One of the things, I mean, I'll be honest with you, do you have the elevation from the street? It was in, let's see, it was
I do not have it.
applicant supplemental information. The conceptual architectural rendering?
I didn't include it as a slide in the presentation.
Well, in looking at it, it evokes visions of Route 17 heading into Charleston, and that is a bunch of very tall apartment buildings right on the road. And no room for roads to expand in the future, no rooms for good sidewalks. I'm concerned about that. Do we have requirements in the UDO of setbacks further than what it is? Because, I mean, that is literally right on top of a 3-lane road.
So this is out of the UDO and form-based codes. If you look, light industrial is this bottom row, so the lot types that are allowed are the dots here. What we're looking at is a large multifamily lot. The table that follows it provides what's called the bulk regulations for the multifamily lot. So what front setback is a 10-foot minimum and 30-foot maximum. I think they're showing 10-foot minimum. They may have moved it to 15. It sits at 15. The max they could go back is 30 feet. And they meet the rest of the criteria here for rear yard, side yard setback, lot coverage. And as you can see, the final column is building height with a minimum of 2-story and a maximum of 4-story.
Question about the sidewalk, there is a proposed sidewalk along
Go back to the plan.
I know it fits the UDO, it fits the requirements, there's very little to do here to require that, but my concern as we revisit the UDO next year are about the height as it relates to other properties around it and how it's literally up on the street. It's going to, if we allow other developments like that and we don't fix this in the UDO, in my opinion, we're gonna end up with a tunnel effect on small roads, like what you see when you run into Charleston now.
I agree.
Do you mind going back to that UDO slide that you were showing? Oh, the lot width, okay. That was what I needed to see, thank you.
And the applicant is here if you have any questions.
Yeah, I'm done.
Would the applicant like this?
Hello, I'm Dan Kiefer with Whitmer Jones Kiefer, and I'm here with Carrie Laveau, the developer, and then the architect, Bill Seacrest, and Caleb King from our office. And thank you everybody for reviewing this tonight. We're here at this point to answer questions and clarify any items that we haven't addressed already.
I look at the other Crown projects in this town, at Old Carolina and out on 170, and I don't see this tall, massive thing sitting right up on the road, and that's what.
What page was that?
I'm not gonna belabor the point, I just.
What page was that?
And they do beat the building dimension requirements?
They do.
Not over a certain, okay.
Did you guys look at entertaining pushing this building back a little bit from the right of way and reconfiguring the parking a little bit? I am also with Commissioner Whitmer that this is out of character for the place. So, and I understand you had to put it between 10 and 30 feet, but
Basically the maximum setback, so it's really that space is unusable at that point.
Does this come back to us for architecture or anything?
the other heartburn that
It's just about the plan, okay.
The other heartburn I'm having is these 8-foot wide parking spaces. I'm sure you are very familiar with Town of Hilton Head, which when they do compact spaces, they shorten the distance, not narrow the width of the lot. Cars don't get really any narrower, they get shorter by and large, not.
If we could go to the, so as you can see on this slide right here, we actually worked with the applicant because we do allow for up to 25% of your parking to be compact spaces. Now, we don't clearly define what is a compact space, so we are working on that. I've worked in other municipalities where it's actually based off of the width. It was 7.5 feet, but you still have the same length of 18 feet. So what we've done is, as you can see, these blue dots are all, except for a few of them, are on the end of the aisle. The intent is that by having it on the end of the aisle, you actually have a little additional space of the island itself for individuals to be able to use for the door. One of the thought process is almost to have a flat curb at that point, so that way it just provides that little bit of extra space while still providing a smaller parking space. They are going to an 8-foot parking space as opposed to 7.5. So what's required is 9 by 18. These few spaces are being proposed at 8. So that was something that was more of a staff recommendation, and the applicant was able to update the plans accordingly.
There's also a couple of places where there should be some trees at the ends of the bays that aren't there on the plan. It's a few spots. that's a nitpicky compared to the overall problem that this project is to me. I'm a strong advocate for property rights, but this is this is majorly inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. This is majorly inconsistent with the master plan for the Buck Island Simmonsville neighborhood. There's a 4-story storage unit on Buckwalter on a much larger right-of-way, and it's 70 feet away from the roadway. And it's not even abutting the roadway face-on like this, and it is problematic to the community. That Buck Island Simmonsville master plan is abundantly clear that this is not what they want to see. They don't want apartments. They don't want this kind of density here. And I understand you've got property rights, but this isn't sensitive to the neighborhood in any way, shape, or form. It's not that we don't need apartments in Bluffton. We absolutely need apartments. I'm also struggling because this is a light industrial site, which we have, of the land uses that we have in this town, that is one of the least amount of spaces that we have, and we're shifting it to multifamily, which means that we have even less opportunity for economic diversity in this town. This is an unfortunate project, quite honestly.
Where does this go from here? Is this it, or does it go to town council?
From next steps, this is a preliminary development plan, so if it's approved, the next step beyond that would be through stormwater MS4 approval, and then a final development plan approval, which goes through the Development Review Committee, and then ultimately building permits.
Have any of the neighboring sites, anyone reached out about anything? Have y'all approached? Okay. Have y'all approached the neighbors and they know what's going on? And
We sent out the notices to all the neighbors.
no, I know that. I just didn't know if they actually talked to people. Or not.
Yeah, we've talked to several of the neighbors.
Neighbor to our north
RSI.
previously owned the site and sold it, so he's aware. We've spoken to him through our civil engineer, and then year-round pool to our south is aware. I spoke to him personally. He actually did our pool on our last project.
Did RSI give any indication as to how they were going to address their parking and dumpster? I know that's not your responsibility, and so I understand that's not a part of our purview, but I'm curious.
We actually did.
Will you come stand up?
Can I have you state your name and the mic for the record, please?
Carrie Levo with Crown Partners.
Please come forward and tonight. Thank you.
Carrie Levo with Crown Partners.
Now go back a little, no.
We did speak to him through the person who was selling us the site regarding those spaces, as there's no official rights for them. As far as what they do, from here, once we develop the site, obviously we are not granting them any rights. It's up to them. But we have a letter from them acknowledging, the lack of an easement or any official in writing right to park their cars.
Have y'all thought about, and I know this because you're working with numbers, but especially those two front buildings, to make that CL lower, smaller, and then progress as you go into the lot. Only because, like Kathleen's mentioned and Charlie, it's not Bluffton and it's not that neighborhood. And yeah, I don't think it's appropriate for, like you said, with the
And
comprehensive.
you did it at Crown and Old Carolina. You have 2-story buildings on the outside to be sensitive to the adjacent neighbors and the look and the mass and scale, and 1 3-story on the inside.
One of those, just because you can doesn't mean you should situations.
Sure. I candidly was not around at Crown for Old Carolina. That was a little bit before my time. With regards to this site, I know I spent maybe 100 hours workshopping this plan based on the UDO code and the restraints with the minimum and maximum setbacks, and then obviously the economics of developing the site with as much land being dedicated to the stormwater wetland. And this was, the best way we could get it done.
and make it work for us.
See, this is the problem that we have with all developers. You're focusing on your site, you're not focusing on your surroundings and your community. And this kind of turns its back on what's going on around within its neighborhood. So that's what's difficult, I think, for all of us. This isn't just something you plop down on a piece of property. Like, I understand the UDO, and it's, you know, they're different. You might meet every single criteria, but like you said, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So we've had this argument a lot with other areas in the historic district, people not being sensitive. So that's a big struggle, and that's not been thought of at all.
Can I ask you a question? I don't want to step on legality, and that's why I'm asking you. Is it within our purview to talk about stepping it down in the front so that it blends in better with the community and those type of things?
So as y'all are well aware, you have criteria that you are required to consider on any of these applications. And one of the complicating factors, I just speak as frankly and openly as I possibly can. Obviously, the complicating factor on this one is it's zone light industrial. And light industrial does permit residential uses and a multifamily residential use. And it is based off of the site dimensions, unlike residential general, which surrounds this property. Residential general use, at least on some number of sides, which would be 4 units an acre. And that's your moderate density use. This obviously is substantially higher density than 40 units an acre. But ultimately, if you look at your development plan criteria under your UDO, it is very objective. When y'all evaluate master plans, when you evaluate your COFA-HD, there's a lot more subjectivity in there. Massing and scale. Does this comply with the comp plan? Does this comply with the master plans and all the associated documents? You have that subjectivity that you can really use to make your final determination. In this case, the criteria is relatively objective. You hear from staff what their opinion is on the UDO and how the UDO applies. You've heard from staff as to all of the criteria, and obviously the applicant is in agreement with staff on that. But ultimately, it's your determination on the criteria. Staff doesn't make the final decision on a prelim, y'all do. So I would defer to you and defer to y'all's judgment to better directly answer your question. I think it is absolutely appropriate for you to discuss that and to see if that can be managed. That being said, the criteria is the criteria, and making that final determination is giving an objective evaluation of the criteria and making a determination based off of that. I understand that this is a very, very tough project for y'all. Having sat in front of you for a number of years now on a monthly basis, I can read your faces, I think, fairly well to find when you're struggling with something. And this obviously is a project that y'all are struggling with because it does not seem consistent with Bluffton. It certainly does not seem consistent with Buck Island, Simmonsville in that master plan. So if you have any particular questions about any of the particular criteria, I'd be more than happy to consider those and see if I can't provide an opinion tonight. But again, this is a preliminary development plan application. Criteria is evaluated under the UDO and any other governing documents that may apply. That does not, in this case, include the comp plan. And but that y'all are the architects and the keepers of the comp plan, so that's there's a little bit of, you certainly can consider it in any of your actions.
We worked on it so long. Months.
Any other questions? I'll take a seat.
Thank you. I pulled up on Google Maps and I'm looking at these 4 houses, 5, 6 houses right across the street that now are gonna look out their front door and go, how did we get here?
And that's it's, again, just kind of speaking to y'all as planning commissioners and residents of the town. And obviously, we try to send out notices to everybody as part of the zoning code, and by we, I mean the applicant in this case. But the reality is that probably a handful of them are tenants, and the mail may go elsewhere. So that's the reality of it. I'm sure that there will be comment about this, because I know of y'all's position and I know how difficult this can be. I want to be very clear that I understand your frustration. I recognize it, and the criteria is the criteria as far as the comp plan and considerations. When y'all recommend ordinances to be approved by town council, zoning ordinances, part of that consideration is whether they are in conformity with the comp plan. So the zoning ordinances have already been predetermined as being in conformity with the comp plan, and if it fits the zoning ordinances, it thereby meets the comp plan, but then you take all those different zoning ordinances and combine them together, and you might get something that is inconsistent. And it's just the unfortunate nature of trying to deal with a zoning code where there perhaps isn't the specificity that you would otherwise see in many other zoning districts, because this is light industrial.
Complicated.
What's also interesting is our last UDO edits were prior to the most recent revision to our comp plan as well.
So typically, and that's why you would, with the new comp plan, you're going to start, and as Mr. Eichert has brought up, y'all are going to start looking at different revisions to the UDO, but you can't make those revisions until you get your comp plan. And so you do have, we are in a little bit of an overlap here, but one has to happen before the other. And this application was filed before there were any pending zoning ordinances under consideration. So it falls under whatever the current zoning code is, or the zoning code at the time of the application.
Hypothetically speaking, there's a possibility, so this is
I
a
love hypothetical questions.
this is a staff question. When you're proposing a building on the frontage of Buck Island and it says a 10 to 30 foot setback, what percentage of the building frontage has to be within that 10 to 30 foot setback? Could you L-shape it back?
It has to touch that portion of it.
So they could use it for common space, open space up there, and push the building out somewhere else essentially, or there's reconfiguration possibilities in this.
The
That they
furthest
could
back you
maintain.
can go is that 30 foot.
For a portion of the frontage of the building.
Well, yeah, it's whatever the front of the building is, so.
It can't go any further back than 30 feet.
Right, I get that, but you don't have to have all 100 feet of building up on that frontage. You could step it, and not just step it back height-wise where the second floor is set back, but also where the front, how it addresses the street gets reshaped.
Once they're in that 10 to 30 zone.
I would just highly encourage, I know you don't have to, but I would just highly encourage you to reconsider what ways you might be able to massage this. I'm not saying give up apartments. I'm saying look at it from a lens of being contextually sensitive to the neighborhood. Because once this goes up, I mean, it's hard.
It's not going to be good. So.
It's not going to be good. And it's going to be in the papers. It's going to be on Facebook. It's going to be in my inbox of, Catherine, why did you say yes to something? And it's because I have to. Now, and so kudos to the design team. You've certainly made good use of the UDO. You found every way to maximize the site, and that is an impressive job right there. I will absolutely hand that to you.
And I think you're hearing us and Kevin, I think you're hearing us, that hopefully you can, if the commission approves this in a minute, you can work with the applicant to try and somehow get it away from looking like it's sitting right on the road at 4 stories in a neighborhood of 2 stories, just because that property happened to be zoned that way in that location, and the use got changed from the original intent. I don't know the answer.
I think it's hard when you're looking at the for town council and planning commission, and even some of these consultants, to go through and look site by site and find all of these little opportunities, and to button that all up. I think that's a hard ask.
That's an impossible task.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
This isn't impossible.
Again, you gotta remember, the comprehensive plan, it's a guiding policy document, and the UDO is the regulatory document. So not every single time they're going to be consistent with each other. Here's a prime example. So the by right is that they are allowed to go up to the 4 stories. We have talked with the applicant in the past about that, the intent of trying to, push back a little bit from an architectural standpoint. However, you cannot base your decision on the architecture.
But that's why we're struggling.
Yes, I
You know that.
understand that, completely understand. We worked with them as much as we can with, various foundation plantings, the plantings out along the front. There will be some limitations. Obviously, there is a overhead power line at that location. I can't remember if you said you were looking to bury that.
We would be looking to bury that.
So that's a plus. So the overhead power line, if it can get buried, that gives them opportunity for larger, mature trees, as opposed to trees that would have to be smaller in nature. Typically, at that point, you're looking at crepe myrtles, anything under a power line. So that gives more flexibility during the landscape portion of it. Those trees can help to minimize that impact of the building. It takes time, like everything, of course, for it to grow a couple of seasons, but it would get there. So that's something that we can obviously work with them on the landscape plan. Preliminary development plan, we don't necessarily have a landscape plan, but at final, we can make sure, and because of the buildings, look to enhance that front buffer, as well as any side buffers. We can make sure to pay special attention to it. Again, with a form-based code, it's, as Dan had mentioned, it's like, if you can get everything to fit in that box, then that's how many units you can get.
I think it's worth noting too, if it was industrial use, they could have up to 5 stories in UDO chart 2, so that could be even higher.
I guess it's not even the 4 stories, it's how you're doing it. Like, like I said, if it was just sensitive to the front, and then you could do what you did in the back, but it's just not neighborly. It's not community in Naples.
Unfortunately, neighborly is not in the UDO.
I know that.
Just for the record, it looks like industrial is 3 stories max, and you have to be at least 30 feet from the frontage. It's not 5.
Sorry, large commercial, not industrial. One above that.
Gotcha.
Walmart? No. It's retail.
Okay, well, I don't know where to go from here, if anybody really wants to make a motion or not, but, I don't know what to do about it.
Well, our initial appointment is to be legally responsible to the town.
Yep.
Would you like to?
Dan, they are still required to do the 9 spaces. They've only got 8, and the handicap is what you said.
Yeah, but we'll take care of that upon, that's a minor issue.
There's also one of the entrances where there's not a handicap parking space located next to it. There's a couple entrances.
Handicap adjacent to each
They'll
building.
fix all that, I mean,
Yeah.
that's the least of our worries.
Yeah.
I'm just buttoning up what the motion might be, that's all.
Want to give a legal motion, Charlie?
Make the motion.
I'm just gonna stand
Back
still.
on it, but I don't wanna make it.
No, what happened? What do we do if no one wants to make a motion?
Well,
I have to make a motion.
so,
We've never been like this.
no, and again, I can sense y'all's frustration and your reluctance to do anything with this, because unfortunately, sorry, didn't mean to say unfortunately. The UDO states what it states at the moment. Again, this is a preliminary development plan. It's gonna go through final development plan process. And then that's it. So,
We know.
you do need to make a motion under the state law. You have to provide a final decision. And it's important that it be done, and it's important that y'all uphold the UDO, and do what y'all are appointed to do, and even when it's extraordinarily difficult. So. I don't want to have to start calling out names, so I'm teasing. This is up to y'all.
One other, item to kind of bring to the forefront of is, while you can't make decisions, based off of arbitrary, comments, if you so choose to move forward with this application, I mean, I think it's helpful to, make statements to the applicant, not necessarily what you would base your decision on, but, further recommendations as they move forward with this process. I think that, they're here, they're listening. We work as much as we can with the UDO, and we try to get them to minimize impacts on certain areas as well. So, I think sometimes statements might help as well, but not necessarily regulated.
All right. I'll do it.
I'm going to go along with Kathleen for a sec. I'll ask a question. You've heard everybody's voice of this and what they feel about the plan itself. Is there a possibility, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but have you looked at potentially even looking at changing the front of those two front buildings?
We have considered a number of options, in concert with staff. I would point out, when we initially brought them this plan, there was more building frontage along Buck Island, and it was at 10 feet. So we took some of their comments into consideration. We stepped it back another 5 feet. Those buildings were essentially full Ls. We cut back the Ls to get more building frontage off. So we have looked at a number of options with them, in a bunch of different ways. And, at the current moment, this was, I guess, the best we could come up with while working within the rules that we were supposed to follow.
So you've heard all of our concerns. Are you listening to those? And is that something you could take back to your group and maybe
course.
discuss? Because those, I mean, obviously, you win, we can't do anything about that. But if you could please be a good neighbor,
Absolutely.
I would really appreciate you guys considering.
And
That's
I think everybody's voice has been said.
There's nothing else.
Not mine, but I'm just saying. I think everybody's voice is there saying, at least take into consideration where you're at.
We can certainly take it into consideration. I mean, this is just a site plan. We have no drawings, so there's a lot of work to be done. And we can certainly discuss.
Dan, can you pull up the overhead view with the buildings and the parking lot? I'm gonna ask a stupid question here, okay? And I know there's setback rules and so on, but we can make exceptions sometimes. What if building 2 and/or building 3 were rotated and some of the parking was put in front just to step it back from Buck Island some? Is that feasible? I don't want to overstep bounds here or anything. I'm just trying to think of a way to pull that nice and scale back.
That's where it gets back to that build two line. So the build two line maximum is 30 feet. So the intent with the form-based code is street, landscaping, building, and then uses behind that. So while I understand what you're referring to of pushing it back from the scale standpoint, the way the code is written is that the buildings are up towards the front.
So what is the process if there's an exception to that code on a piece of property? Is it zoning board? What is it?
Well, that's a variance based off of a hardship from the applicant.
Well, I think the hardship's up here tonight.
Well, I think that's where.
We can't file that.
Yes. But that is something to, as you guys know, January 17th, we have a joint workshop with the town council. So that's one of the items that you'd like to discuss, then I think that could be brought up. However, that's a much larger conversation, and we're at a point for a vote.
Kevin, question for you. The year-round pool building and the RSI, those are set back further and are light industrial. I'm assuming those were in before the
Long
UDO was
before the
added.
Unified Development Ordinance, yes, ma'am.
Was there, maybe you weren't here at the time, was there a discussion about the setbacks that would be appropriate for light industrial?
I think those buildings were there before the properties were even annexed into the town.
So when the UDO was being configured and put together and
I don't.
mines were, because it's just interesting when you've got light industrial already here, you're assigning a light industrial and you've created a UDO that's asking for light industrial to be 10 to 30 feet from
Yeah,
Buck
that seems
Island.
ridiculous.
Like,
Yeah.
that's,
That's the UDO edit we need to talk about.
yeah.
Anyway.
Well, I understand it's a UDO edit. This was a question of history.
Yes, it's an unfortunate.
Uh-huh.
Don't throw anything at me, Kevin. I know you're gonna want to.
I only have a pen,
If you already don't.
mouse, paperclip.
What, I mean, if we all look at this, and we don't even know, because we haven't even asked them, because we're just discussing this, but if the applicant were willing to rotate and push back one of those buildings, and we were willing to do it, and it made sense.
I'd also, remind you
Can't do
that, so staff,
You're setting a precedent.
Well, I'll let.
we've actually, we've worked with the applicant for quite some time, actually quite a few months on these plans. From what first came in to what you see today is a great improvement. So, we're at a point where from a staff level, yes, we understand, that the biggest impact is right up against the road. So fully understand that. I think that, that their entire team have twist and turned these buildings any which way that they can to help to minimize that impact. So that's where, pushed back, more landscaping, burying the power lines to be able to have larger trees out there. So there's a lot of these factors that we've been working through over the months in order to minimize those impacts along the road.
I have a silly question for the I know it's not about architecture, but the planning of that with the leasing office. I mean, could that not be towards the front, and then you could scale that down and then make up your stacking on your building one?
So that building it's actually 3 stories of apartments and then it's a pull-in garage.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying if that.
Again,
I was just trying to give an option as far as maybe putting the leasing stuff on the facade, on the front face and scale down. Yeah, but then that building one be reconfigured so it had the full 4,
It does.
but it's got parking underneath. I'm just saying for the units to make up the
Well, it's
units.
also got the pool area back there too, which if you shift that open space, now the hard part is they've got 2 buildings versus this being adjacent to one building. And you've got a road that's gonna come between.
I just
so
think there's room to shuffle things.
Yeah.
There's a way to shuffle things.
And we can't be the designers of
That's all.
this either. Like,
No, I know,
that's-
I'm just saying there's room to do things.
Did you say, that you didn't, you said something to the effect, and correct me that I'm going to be wrong, not that I'm going to be wrong, but that you didn't, we couldn't agree to increase the setback or allow a greater setback than 30 feet because it sets a precedent. Is that what you said?
No, I'm
Okay.
saying that
It's
that's,
a variance, which they would have to apply.
They would have to, yeah.
So the only legal
And it's
authority
not-
to deviate from a zoning ordinance is the variance process approved by the BZA, unless there is some sort of subjectivity included within your ordinance, like the historic district, you'll have substitute materials are sometimes accepted at certain, if there's a determination made. Or like y'all made with the last project, there was a determination that this was an acceptable substitute. When it comes to building setback lines in the, whatever it's 5.8 point whatever, those are specific, 10 foot minimum, 30 foot maximum. So you would need to get a variance, and a variance under the statute and case law and the UDO is a necessary hardship, which would be unlikely, it just, in my opinion,
It wouldn't
qualify. So it's really, you could do, if the applicant was interested in doing pushing that back away from the road, you likely would need to go the text amendment route, which would slow down their project substantially. So I can't imagine that the applicant would be very inclined to do so. Again, your criteria it doesn't comply with Article 5, and then 310.3.2. Proposed development should be in conformance with any approved development agreement, HUD concept plan, HUD master plan, subdivision plan, none of which are applicable in this case, or any other agreements or plans that are. And so it's up to y'all to determine whether you think any of those other agreements or plans would impact your decision here. And that is a determination for y'all to make, not for me.
Ready? I'm gonna let you do it.
I'm gonna do it. And I'm doing it on the basis of I am an advocate for property rights, and you meet the bounds of that. I would like to say, before I make my motion, I'd also like to say thank you for working with the staff to make improvements. I am glad to hear about the power lines being buried. And I appreciate that you guys have put some work in to try to reconfigure this to be less imposing. I would encourage you to continue to work towards trying to create as much sensitivity to the neighbors as possible. And with that being said, I make a motion to approve the application as submitted with, and also with the recommendation that staff put forward to include 9 accessible spaces.
Go ahead, second.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Yes. I'm about to vote the way I'm about to vote, not because I want to, but because I have to. I strongly, strongly, strongly encourage y'all to work with town staff and come up with something that makes it so that we and you can drive through this neighborhood when this project is done and not have people throwing rocks at us and upset at us because we met the intent of the law. I'm sorry, because we met the letter of the law, but not the intent. The intent in that neighborhood and in that area is not to have something that's massed like that at the front.
I'd also like to add for the record, this could be a 4-story industrial building this close to the frontage. So this is an improvement over what could have been, for the record.
Anywhere else.
And
Yes.
staff, Kevin said the same thing, that it's much better than it was when it first came in, so.
We appreciate that.
So, with all of that, hope you've heard us. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Do we have any further discussion, Kevin?
I can talk for
Nope, let's see, what time is it? It's
She needs 6
7:24.
minutes.
I don't have anything else. Just a reminder that we'll send out more notifications about the joint public, joint workshops. Joint public workshop with town council.
Okay, do I have a motion to
Make a motion to adjourn.
adjourn?
Second.
Any further discussion? Have a great night. Thank you very much. All in
Great.
favor?
Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you.